Not your mama's house. And welcome to Not Your Mama's House, our historic home and low-key comedy podcast. I'm Mary Katherine.
And I'm Coco.
And welcome back for episode number 7.
What? We're at 7
We're
now?
at 7, lucky number 7.
Whoa.
I know. So
Where does time go?
time flies when you're having fun.
That's right.
How has your week been, Coco?
It's good. It's been really good. But should we tell them what this is? Do you want to start off with it's a historical podcast?
Well, I did say that in the intro, a historic home and low-key comedy podcast, but it's for...
Sorry.
It's okay. Listening ears, Coco. No, but it is, we welcome any and all listeners, those who love history, those who love homes, architecture, who want to have a little laugh. We keep this G to PG so we don't offend ears, and so that everybody who's in the car or on a run or wanting to listen to something that is mid-length in podcast form has something to listen to.
Yeah. You just want to escape from the world? Escape with us.
Yes. And we hope you'll also learn something.
Right. That's right. Yeah, my week has gone. It's been a crazy busy week, right? With the election, and went to a concert and went shopping downtown, the important stuff.
So many
happy
important
hour.
things. Oh, my goodness.
It's been a big week.
The pressing social calendar of a retiree right here, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm exhausted. I seriously need to take a couple days off just to recover from all my fun.
And you're so young that says a lot.
I know. I am. I really am.
Yes, I know.
So I was up till 2 a.m. I think I finally got in bed about 3, the election morning, and just couldn't take my eyes off of what was going on, especially after the 2020 election.
Yeah.
So it was really good. It was fun.
And then the next night you were up late again, right?
I was. Yeah. Went to see Karen Waldrop. She was at the Main Street Crossing in Tomball, Texas. And she had been on The Voice previously and was one of the semifinalists. And she's fantastic. She's a niece to one of my girlfriends. Fantastic show. Really enjoyed it.
That's awesome. So then Thursday rolls around, and I had not heard from you in like 2 days because you'd been so busy and tired.
That's right.
And then I get a text from you at like 2 p.m. and you're like, I just had my 4th cup of coffee. I'm finally feeling alive.
I know. That's true. I could not function. I was so exhausted.
And then you're like, and Poppy's taking a 3-hour nap.
Yeah. For sure.
Which
and
actually
he did.
is not unusual for him.
That's true.
That's
true.
The best is, even growing up, we would be, I don't know, working on homework or all down in the living room watching a movie, and Poppy would just like disappear.
Yes.
And we'd be like, where did Poppy go? And it was inevitably, it was to take a nap. He would just like go hide somewhere and nap.
And nap. Poor guy with the 3 girls growing up. Oh. It was, I'm sure, a lot for our Poppy, as we call him, the princess manager.
Oh, I was going to say, we call him the king of napping.
And the king of napping.
Princess manager, too.
Yeah,
sure.
For sure. That's true. But
okay.
He's got the napping down to a science, no question.
He is the most,
amazing.
I mean, I do get my ability to sleep so hard from him, but he really has one-upped me on how fast he can fall asleep.
Oh, my goodness.
And how efficient of a sleeper he is.
He is. And, when he was traveling in Europe all the time, then that was such a benefit to him.
Oh, yeah. I know.
It works out, right?
Yes. Speaking of Poppy, do you have a really good Poppy story to tell?
Oh, my gosh. Yes. So, if you've listened to the podcast, if you recall, probably about a month or 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, something like that, we were in the Outer Banks and had a great time with friends. Just stayed at a beautiful home that belongs to one of our friends' brothers. And it was our church small group, all went together, a blast. Well, one evening, Puppy decides I haven't had a chance because he was golfing for several days during the time we were gone, and he decides I've got to go out and buy some T-shirts and hats. I need some new hats, and I want some T-shirts. So we go out, and I'm busy shopping, looking at stuff for the littles because I wasn't sure what to get them, blah, blah, blah. And Poppy chooses his own T-shirts, right? So if you're familiar with the movie or the Netflix series called Outer Banks, there's a term that they use, and it's called Pogue. And they call it Pogelandia, Pogue Life. So Pogue refers to kind of like the other side of town. We're all God's children, love everyone, but as people say, the other side of town. So kind of like it's divided into Pogues and Cougs, right? So Poppy, we're home, and he's got, and keep in mind, it's a slang term, right? So it also refers to, from their standpoint, the Pogues in the Outer Banks, like a throwaway fish. It's called a Pogue. But I was just looking online. I'm like, hey, what does Pogue really mean? I just found out it's a military term back from World War I, refers to two things. Could be an individual that actually didn't serve or a male homosexual. So Poppy is going to die because he comes in and he's got this shirt on. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty bright color shirt. I'm like, Poppy, why does your shirt say Pogue? He goes, Pogue? What do you mean? He's like looking, Pogue? No, it says Rogue. I'm like, no, dude, that says Pogue. You know what a Pogue is? He's like, no, it says Rogue. No, it says Pogue. This is why I always go shopping with him. So we were, oh my gosh, he was at your sister's yesterday, and he's got his Pogue shirt on. I'm like, Mike, don't be wearing that shirt. Just cut it up.
It's a rag now.
It's a rag.
What color is it?
It's bright blue.
It would be blue.
It would be blue. He won't wear anything but blue.
This goes back to what we were saying last week about how you need to be the one to pick out his outfits.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, first off, how many hats did he buy?
Let's see.
Between Outer Banks and your trip to Greece. Wasn't it 7?
It's something like that. I think in Greece he bought maybe 4 or 5. So, yeah, probably 7.
Oh, my gosh.
7. I bought a couple. I don't even know what happened to them. Maybe they're in his stash.
This reminds me of, going back to this is why you need to pick out his clothes for him.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we went to Disney World? And
oh my gosh.
So this was like early 90s. We go with another family to Disney World, and my dad decides to wear this bright red shirt.
Because I picked his outfit out for him. And how many years ago? I mean, this is like, you were 6 or 7.
Yeah, I was in first grade.
Yeah, so we're talking almost 30 years ago.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't think you picked that one out for him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, whoops.
I did.
So maybe this is why he doesn't like you to pick out his clothes. This is why he always wears his old clothes. Okay, sorry, listeners. We'll get back to the story. So my mom picks out his outfit for him, and it's this red shirt and white jorts, jean shorts. And my dad is like downstairs at the character breakfast, and all of these guys are looking at him. And this other dad from the other family we're with is like, Mike, why are you wearing a red shirt? And my dad is like, why not? And he was like, because it is the Pride Week at Disney World, and the color they've chosen this year is red. And my dad was so shooketh. I have never seen him run upstairs faster.
He did. And hey,
Changed his shirt real quick.
exactly. You know what? If you're homosexual, you do you,
Oh,
right?
for sure. No shade there.
The thing is, when you're not, and it is assumed that you may be, it's not good.
It's alarming.
Especially if you're middle-aged. So it was not good.
So maybe this is really the reason he doesn't like you picking out his clothes for him.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's okay.
Well, it backfired this time. So bad.
Can't win with it, can't win
Oh
without
my
it.
gosh. At least he didn't get the shirt that said Poglandia. He would have probably thought that said Roglandia. I think I'm going to take the shirt and paint it.
He said he was going to. He's like, I'm going to take a permanent marker and make the P and R so then I can wear it.
Right.
Okay, flipping back to the election
Heavens to
really
Betsy.
fast. So I was listening to this podcast and they were talking about it's a bunch of people who live and work in DC. And so they were talking about their very first job as working in the political realm. And it made me think of my first job working in politics. And, I was in politics working on campaigns in college.
Yes.
It didn't pay well, but it was fun. Great learning experience. Anyway, but I was thinking about how I got that job. And so the congressman I was working for, his son and I were at this medical school camp. It was like for rising seniors. So the summer between your junior and senior year in high school, you went and you got to go to this camp. And they, taught you how to suture wounds. They taught you like a ton of stuff. So you could really decide whether or not you wanted to go into college pre-med.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was so much fun. But one of the guys in my group had this backpack and it said like the name of the congressman on it. And I was like, why does your backpack say like, this team? And he was like, it's because my family owns a bobsled team.
What?
And I'm the manager. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, I didn't know we had bobsled teams in Texas. And he was like, yep, we sure do.
No.
Yeah. So then flash forward. And so he grew up in the town that I went to college in. And so like over Christmas break, I had to get back early for a sorority rush and he was still in town. And so we connected and he was like, oh yeah, like come hang out. So anyway, I went over there and like he had a bunch of friends over and we were just hanging out. And so that's how I got plugged in with his dad and his dad's campaign and everything like that.
Awesome.
Anyway, yeah, but it was really funny. And I was like, wait a second. So you guys don't own a bobsled team? And he was like, no, my dad is a congressman. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Oh my gosh. No, I've never heard that. That's great.
So
that's,
I know.
The funniest things just happen in life. And sometimes you've just got to stop and appreciate it, and
For
just
sure.
like sometimes I'll be driving along and something just happened and you just got to laugh. You're like, I can't believe that just happened.
I know.
That is hilarious.
Yes.
Just
rather
silly,
than
goofy.
being offended by everything like everybody seems to be these days, just
roll
take it in
with
stride.
Yeah.
Laugh
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was really funny. It did give me a giggle on Tuesday remembering
Oh
that.
my gosh.
No, my family does not own a bobsled team. I was like, okay,
Whoopsie daisy.
now I know. This is what I get for growing up in the sheltered suburban world. Just kidding.
Thank goodness.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see. I had something funny to say about one of my kids. And I can't remember what it is, but we are going to the children's festival after this. And that will be really fun. I know.
Are you sure you won't come shopping with me? Just a little.
Listen,
A little.
we're recording this on a Saturday, and we normally do this on Fridays. But there is nothing I can think of I want to do less than going to the mall on a Saturday.
Yeah, that is a good point.
So sorry.
That is a good point. But there's a great sale going on, and today is the last day. And you know me, I can never decide When I look at something, I've got to think about it.
Yes, it's true.
That's true.
Well,
Okay.
I'm that way too. And then I'll just sit on it, and then if it's meant to be, I'll go buy it.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
So, shall we get started?
Yes.
Oh, few things, listeners. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. And also, if you'd like to write in, our email is our.roomies, ROOMIES @gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. All right. So, Coco,
Yes.
the Not Your Mama's House we're going to be doing today,
Uh-huh.
I was thinking of a house to do, and we claim that we discuss houses from all around the world.
Right.
However, we had not done one from not America.
Ooh.
So today we are doing one from England,
Okay.
and it is Blenheim Palace.
Yes.
So Blenheim, for those of you who don't know, is the only palace, or is the only home in England with palace in the name that's not royal and not Episcopalian. That's a fun fact.
That's a great fact.
So let's take a step back in time to the early 1700s. England is trying to regulate and babysit a group of religious pilgrims that have made their way to America about 80 years prior, and war is raging throughout Europe and the continent. During several wars, a specific English officer stood out in leading successful battles, including some against Bavarian and French antagonists. In recognition of his successes in battles, the English Crown awards John Churchill the Manor of Woodstock, located just outside of Oxfordshire. And in early times, this land had been used as a hunting lodge. Eventually, the lodge was torn down and built into a small manor house. The Queen Mary imprisoned her half-sister Elizabeth here from 1554 to 1555, and it had been used from time to time by royal families since then. So it should be noted that this land and that home were awarded to the Churchills. However, the land was rented to them, and the rent they pay every year is they have to present the royal family a French flag that has 3 fleur-de-lis on it, and that is still a ceremony in process today. So yes, so that's the rent they pay to live on this land.
Wow. And it's kind of designed as a country house, right? In Woodstock, Oxfordshire, England.
Yes, exactly.
That's a mouthful.
I know. So before we get any further, let's chat a little bit about the Churchills. So John Churchill, who is the first Duke of Marlborough, was born in Devon. They were lower on the aristocratic pole. They were kind of more like landed gentry than they were actual aristocrats. And some claim that he is the only aristocrat to have gone from basically a commoner to an aristocrat in one generation.
Wow.
In 1678, Churchill married Sarah Jennings, and in April of that year is when his military career really started taking off. So over the years, he was given several appointments thanks to his loyalty to the crown. Some of these appointments were Lord Churchill of Eyemouth, Governor of the Hudson's Bay Company, and Gentleman of the Bedchamber. When William III was coronated, Churchill was created Earl of Marlborough and made Gentleman of his King's Bedchamber.
Like, what is a
So basically, it's just like
chamber? I mean, no, that's, I'm just saying, I didn't think I know what that is, but wow, I don't know if that would be the best thing to be. But
well, back then it was because, what else do you have to do? It's like really cool if you get to be in the King's inner circle.
Well, that's true. Good point.
So the Churchills had to go into exile in 1692 because John was assisting in trying to reinstall King James II into the throne, and he was a member of the Jacobite Rebellion. But they came back very shortly thereafter. So during the War of the Spanish Succession, Churchill gained the reputation as a capable military commander, and he won several battles in Bavaria. including the Battle of Blenheim in 1704. For his victory at Blenheim, the crown again bestowed the Duke with the title Earl of Marlborough and then eventually Duke of Marlborough. And he was given the land and the manor house in Woodstock. So, and this was, so I have several sources I've used for this. Wikipedia, I listened to 3 documentaries. Also, the Blenheim Palace historical website and the Britannia website as well. So when the Crown gave John Churchill this award, it was basically the sentiment of all of England. So this was just kind of the like physical award given because all of England felt very grateful to John Churchill for his leadership in battle, specifically during the Spanish Succession. So, and the reason, even though it's called the Spanish Succession, he fought in Bavaria and France during this war. And so that's why his rent, so to speak, is the French flag with 3 fleur-de-lis on it. So, when he was awarded this land, the Crown and Parliament also agreed to about £250,000 to be used to build a new estate home. And so that was £250,000 in 1704. It's about, I want to say, $60 million in today's money. So,
sizable amount.
Yes. So anyway, so I know your next question is going to be Churchill. Sounds real familiar. Might you be thinking of Winston Churchill? And if so,
Well,
yes.
Yes, I was.
Indeed, they are related. So, as is Consuela Vanderbilt and Jenny Jerome, who are 2 American heiresses. So,
I don't know Jenny Jerome, do I?
That's Winston Churchill's mom.
Okay.
Yes. So, and they were both American heiresses from the East Coast.
Oh.
So, and also Lady Diana Spencer, also related. So when the Duke and his wife passed away, they had 2 sons and 5 daughters. So their 2 sons passed away before they ever had children. And so this title went to their oldest daughter.
Okay.
And
so the title of Duke of Marlborough.
Yes. Well, it would go to her husband, I guess. And so that's when
she'd be the Duchess.
Exactly. So that's when it became Spencer Churchill because she married a Spencer.
Oh, okay.
And so he agreed to the hyphenation because he wanted to keep his aristocratic name. And so that continued. And so Spencer Churchill has stayed the name of this family, the Marlboroughs. And so then Consuela Vanderbilt married the 8th Duke of Marlborough's oldest son, who became the 9th Duke of Marlborough. And Jenny Jerome married the 9th Duke of Marlborough's 3rd oldest son.
Wow.
So they're related by like being cousins, basically.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how that lineage went. And so Winston Churchill was in fact born at Blenheim, but he was 2 months premature. So the only reason he was born there, because it wasn't his, in a way it's his family's home because his uncle was the Duke of Marlborough.
Yeah.
But in his lineage, they didn't have a dukedom. He was just part of the aristocratic Spencer Churchill family. So the reason he was born there is because they were visiting family, and apparently a very rough carriage ride had instigated Jenny Jerome Churchill's labor. And thus, sweet little Winston was born 2 months early at Blenheim. So let's just pivot back real fast. I kind of went on a tangent there, but I thought that was like very interesting family
It is.
family lineage,
Yeah,
and how it ties to America also.
agreed.
So remember how I mentioned that Sarah Jennings was John Churchill's wife, right?
Right.
Okay. So she is probably the first recorded Karen that you could legit say she was a Karen.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
She was apparently capable of great charm, and she befriended Princess Anne, who eventually became Queen Anne.
Mm-hmm.
However, she was very persnickety and would be really nice one moment and very not nice the next. And she and her bestie, Princess / Queen Anne, would often get in fights that would escalate to the point of Queen Anne taking away funding for their home.
Ooh.
Yes. So um, one might say they had a tumultuous relationship. So,
It sounds like it.
but she was a big influence on Queen Anne, and she was kind of a mover and shaker in that social circle. So that was very good for her because often her husband, was this military hero. And so he would be fighting in campaigns and stuff overseas.
Right.
And so she would be the one to kind of keep the Churchill name up at the forefront of the royal household.
Right. So she had to be probably
Yes.
pretty tough.
So just put a pin in that tumultuous relationship real fast, though. Okay. So, as I mentioned, so they were awarded this land. There was this house on there, but it was kind of a rickety old house, like not really the monument that the people of England wanted this home to be, as like to represent the people of England's success in this huge war for Spanish succession.
Okay.
And so when they started to come up with who they might commission to design and build this house, the Duchess was known to favor Sir Christopher Wren. He's famous for many buildings across Great Britain, including St. Paul's Cathedral and other national buildings. However, the Duke had other ideas, and he wanted somebody kind of not heard of, not that well known. And so he chose a kind of not very well known architect at the time named Sir John Vanbrugh. And they had met at a playhouse where they were watching a play. And it was kind of like then and there on the spot is when John Churchill was like, yes, you're the guy. And what's interesting is, so nothing is really said about this, but it is my hypothesis. So, Vanbrugh had lived in France for a while, and it was in fact imprisoned for treason in France for being a spy. And in France and Bavaria is where John Churchill had fought many of his battles.
Right.
And so I wonder if that military tie and that like sense of patriotism is really where he was like, you've done your part to serve the crown. I'm very loyal to the crown. I want you.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, but here's the catch. Sir John Vanbrugh was not actually a trained architect. He was self-taught and he was a popular dramatist. And he usually worked in conjunction with other trained and more practical actual architects.
Right.
Including Nicholas Hawksmoor, who was an apprentice to Sir Christopher Wren, who, if you recall, is who Duchess Sarah wanted to design the home.
Okay. Right.
It's all tied together.
Yeah.
So, Hawksmoor and Vanbrugh had recently completed the first stages of the Baroque Castle Howard in Yorkshire. And there is this, so in the European continent, and some people call it, in America, we call it Baroque.
So what you're saying is, if it's not Baroque, don't fix it.
Because it's such an important architectural style.
That's right.
No, but in Europe, they call it Baroque. So,
Like Obama?
exactly.
Gotcha.
So, in the European continent at that time, this Baroque style was very much in vogue, and it's very ornate details, lots of columns. All of the peaks of the roofs have gargoyles and other designs, just very ornamental in its look. And so Vanbrugh had studied this when he was in France and taken it and made it a little bit more refined to call it the English Baroque style. And this was a very short-lived architectural
style.
Yeah, or vibe or
Yeah.
yes. And so anyway, so this is what Vanbrugh was. His goal was to design an English Baroque style home for the Churchills. So really what Vanbrugh thought was going to put him on the map, because he was like, I'm designing this amazing monument to the strength of England. I'm going to be such a famous architect. But that proved to not be the case. So given his extravagant and intricate design, many in Parliament accused Vanbrugh of overly spending. And the Duchess of Marlborough, Sarah, would not come to his defense because she felt very slighted because it wasn't her guy. And so given her closeness to Queen Anne and her husband's frequent absences on military campaigns, she was very much aware of the funding situation and how precarious that was, because she was hearing from Queen Anne how Parliament was pushing back on the design and the spend of this home. So the nation was paying these bills, but it's funny because almost from the get-go, there was this fighting about like, well, who was paying the bills? So at one point, the Churchills had to pony up £60,000, which is about like $14.5 million, to finish the home because they weren't getting any money from Parliament. And so it was like a constant battle of like, well, who's paying for this? Who's paying for this? You know, because it was like anytime they needed to pay a bill, they had to go to Parliament for Parliament to write the check. And what made this also really hard is, so again, John Churchill was given this award by the Crown, but they never put an exact amount on how much he was given. So it was like not a not to exceed amount or anything like that. And it was in fact not actually signed by a member of the royal family. It was just like a proclamation that was out there.
Oh.
So that, yeah. So that made it very difficult for everybody to, yes. So, okay. So remember how I was talking to you about Queen Anne and Sarah Jennings Churchill,
right?
How they were best friends, but it was on again, off again. Okay. So the relationship between them became strained and fraught. And John Churchill had also fallen out of favor. And so they had this huge quarrel in 1711. And then a few months after that, it all went downhill. And so the Churchills put themselves in a self-imposed exile. Therefore, construction stopped on the home, and it didn't resume again until 1714 when Queen Anne passed away.
Wow.
Yes. So on their return, the Duke and Duchess came back into favor with the court. Everybody missed them. Dorbs. And so the Duke decided that he was going to complete the project come hell or high water. He wanted it done. He's like, I have been working on this thing for 10 years. It's the never-ending house. So, however, remember, the Duchess, she's a cranky Karen.
Yeah.
So it was not all peace and love on the construction site.
Right.
Because she didn't like Vanbrugh, and she didn't like his spending, and she didn't like his design or anything like that. So in 1716, work resumed. In 1717, the Duke suffered a stroke and the Duchess took control. And she didn't like spending a lot of money on this because she felt like it was extravagant.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm very impressed. She was very thrifty, apparently. And so she fired all of these like amazing artisans and instead hired these artisans that would work for a lower wage. But that made Vanbrugh really upset because he wanted these like very elite top level artisans,
Right.
but they wouldn't work for the lower wages. And so it was just this like round and round battle. So Vanbrugh was kicked off of the job site, and in his place, Hawksmoor took over. And so one of the things that happened is, so when you walk into the Great Hall, which we'll get to the layout here in a second,
Okay.
when you like first walk in, there's this like amazing mural up in the ceiling. And so that painter was supposed to do all of the painting in the entire palace,
Uh-huh.
and he wouldn't work for the lower wages. And so instead, this other painter painted this really cool scene that's like 3-dimensional in the dining room.
Wow.
Yes. So I'll talk about that more. But so she also had furniture designers and different things like that that were, in fact, going to complete the work. But what she did is she kept the high-end designers and builders in the public spaces, and then she used the lower-end designers and builders in the more private spaces that nobody would see.
That's smart.
Yes. So in that way, she was very smart.
Well, yeah, and I guess the first Duke, I mean, he was a soldier, so he wasn't a rich man, and the fortune that they possessed was mostly used for furnishing the palace or finishing the palace.
Yes. So, and the Duke died in 1722, and finishing the palace became Sarah's sole focus. And so, again, Vanbrugh was kicked off of the job site. So Hawksmoor was there, and when he being John Churchill passed away in 1722, Sarah and Hawksmoor decided that they were going to build a commemorative arch similar to the Arch of Titus in Rome to commemorate for John Churchill. And so they designed the Arc of Triumph at the entrance to the park from Woodstock. And so Hawksmoor also completed all of the interior design, all of the ceilings, all the staterooms, all of that fun stuff. So the final date of completion isn't very well known. However, in 1725, the home was opened up for a public tour, and Vanbrugh's wife tried to get on to the site to take a look, and the Duchess heard about it and kicked her off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So she had not forgotten. So, and then in 1732, there were still bills being paid for the completion. So anyway, there we go. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the layout of Blenheim. All right. So when you look at Blenheim, it is this huge, when you look at it on a map, I guess I should say, it's this huge sprawling estate. So basically what it is it's one large rectangle, and it has like two courtyards centered in the middle. So like one on the east side and one on the west side, interior courtyards. And then it has these two smaller rectangles that come off of it. So it's very symmetrical in that sense. However, to get to Blenheim, you go through a series of small arches, and that's made to play on emphasizing the vast expanse of Blenheim. And again, one of the things that made this house hard to construct and build is that the people of England, and consequently Parliament, wanted this to be this extravagant monument. Meanwhile, the Duke and Duchess of Marlborough wanted it to be a residence. And, in the 1700s, it was just really hard to make those two things one.
I see.
And so that's kind of where some of the squabbling took place too.
Makes
So
sense.
as it looks today, it's this, so like brown, dark tan sandstone. The main entrance has these like huge columns, and then kind of on either side are like 3-story towers, and they have like 4 little points at the top that are decorated. It's just all of these like little tiny ornamentations and decorations all along the top of this very rectangular and symmetrical building. And what's interesting too is when you really go and look at it, a lot of the ornamentation is in tribute to the Duke's successes in war. So like some of the columns at the base, they have cannonballs.
Oh,
And
that's unique.
yes, and then there's this British lion that has the French cockerel in its paw.
Oh.
So really interesting stuff like that. And so going back to this main rectangle, so that would be kind of like the main dwellings. So this house was very much built in a formal, almost like royal, very aristocratic way, where you have these very public rooms kind of up at the front. And then as you make your way back, the rooms get more and more private. And so in the very back is where you have the Duke and Duchess's apartments. So where they would live. And even in those, it's like they have a sitting room, and then they have like a smaller like dressing room, and then it's like all the way back to their bedroom. And so this was set up in a way where they could host and entertain, and then they would have kind of their more private areas. And then off of the large rectangle, on the 2 smaller rectangles, so on the east side was where all of the domestic services were housed. So like laundry, kitchen,
Right.
the servants' quarters, all in that. And then on the right side, that smaller rectangle was the chapel, the stables, and like even an indoor riding stable or a riding center.
Quite large.
Yes. So when you first walk into the house, or this, manse, basically, you look up, as I mentioned, and you're in the Great Hall, and you look up, and there's this huge mural on the ceiling, and it's to commemorate the successes of the Duke's battles. And so it has him as like I want to say as like a Roman soldier, maybe. It's something like that. So
as a Roman soldier.
Yes, or as like this like very victorious hero. And then when you keep going into the salon, which is where they would have had dinners, and this room is where that 3D painting was, and it again was originally supposed to be painted by the same artist who painted the ceiling, but he was too expensive and he wouldn't work for the lower wages, and so they got this other painter to paint it instead. And he painted it in a way where it's almost like people are looking in at the event that's going on. So it has these columns, and then it has like people standing in and among the columns, like spectating the dinner or what have you is going on at the time.
Wow.
Yes. And then beyond that is the library. And initially this was set up as an art gallery, but they felt it would serve more purpose as a library. And at the end of the library is this organ where famous people have come and played. So that is kind of the main description of this home. Okay, let's see here. So the grounds outside are really interesting because initially the land was landscaped to be like a very formal garden like you see in Versailles with all of the
Yes.
hedging and the
Oh,
stones. And
yes. Uh-huh.
but that quickly fell out of fashion because if you think of like English country estates, you think of rolling hills and,
Yes.
undulating land. And actually, in the 1200s, one of the first kings had put 7 miles of fencing in so that he could keep in deer and other animals like porcupines to hunt.
He hunted porcupines?
And deer. I want to say there were like some lions. So anyway,
Yeah.
so in a way, it was also kind of like hearkening back to its original time.
Uh-huh.
And what it's really funny too is in this time, the English follies were really popular to put into designs. So, famous like ancient like Greek structures or Roman structures, but they were made to look old when in fact they weren't that old.
Right.
It was just kind of something like for your eye to look at.
Uh-huh.
That was very in vogue. And what's funny is Sarah Jennings Churchill had requested that all of the ruins from the house that was there before they built Blenheim be torn down. And when I was reading that, I was like, girl, you should have just left them.
Right.
Because they would have come in style, 50 years down the road.
Yeah. Right.
So anyway.
Or put them in some other part of the house.
Yes.
Do something unique.
Yeah. But,
right.
Hindsight's 2020.
It wasn't vogue then.
Just
rip it down and
exactly
move forward.
Yes. And when they were also designing the like formal English gardens, they straight up over-engineered this bridge. So there was this like tiny little pond, and they decided they were going to make a bridge over this pond. The bridge is like 3 stories tall.
What?
It was made to be habitable. And so it had bedrooms, it had a ballroom, it had a library.
The bridge?
The bridge.
So in the bridge?
Yes.
You could live in the bridge?
You could live in the bridge. It was so extra. So
that is extra.
And so when people would like come upon Blenheim, they'd see this bridge and they'd be like, why is there this bridge for this tiny pond? Like, so confusing.
Yeah.
So that was just one of the things that they designed and built when they decided, down the way in 1760, actually, that they wanted to completely redo the layout of the landscape. And so they brought in someone you may or may not know, Lancelot Capability Brown. He's maybe one of the most well-known landscape architects ever, but specifically at this time in England. You just say Capability Brown, and Englishmen and women are like, yep, know who that is. So he was really known for creating that park-like scene that you see at a lot of country estates. That was all on him.
Oh,
so what he did is he would take an area and he would plant a bunch of trees, and he would really plan out the landscape to make it both appealing for the eye, but also make it look very natural.
Right.
So one of the things he did is he flooded part of the land. And so that bridge, you only see like half of it now. The rest is underwater.
What?
Yeah.
So the bedrooms are underwater?
Yeah. And so they had drained it.
Shame.
I know they drained it to redredge the, what's now called the Great Lake. So they were cleaning out the Great Lake. And so they drained it, and they went in and were looking, and there was still a fireplace. There was still pottery. I think there were still some books.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, in this bridge. So.
And what's the bridge called again? It's just probably the bridge at Blenheim.
The big old bridge.
The big old bridge.
Yes.
Exactly.
So that's really when the Blenheim we see today became this cohesive estate that everybody knows and loves. So let's just talk a little bit more about what has happened to Blenheim since then. So, of course, as we mentioned, and as you alluded to, they didn't have a ton of money. They were gentry, but they weren't aristocrats. And then, Duke Marlborough was a war hero, so they didn't have a ton of money.
Right.
And so a lot of times these country estates were made as a show of wealth, right? But this one, in fact, wasn't. This was a show of gratitude from the people of England to a war hero. And so
nice.
it is. But very quickly, the funds started dwindling. And so it was really hard to take care of this house. And the person that came in and really stepped up to do what needed to be done was the 9th Duke of Marlborough. And he married Consuelo Vanderbilt and was able to use her wealth to completely redo and renovate and update their family home. And so it's thanks to the Vanderbilt money that the Blenheim we see today stands and is what it is.
Wow.
And then today also, let me, before I get to today. So then during World War II, it became a school. So there was a school I think it was in Woodstock, the town, and it had to close. And so Blenheim was opened to be this boys' school. And then it was also a hospital. And then I believe MI5 also operated out of Blenheim.
Really?
And then there was a case of German measles and the mumps all at the same time. And so the library became a hospital. And so on one end is where the German measles patients were kept, and on the other end was where the mumps patients were kept. And then when it was handed back over to the Marlboroughs, they were looking and, taking stock of everything and realized they were missing 3 pipes from the pipe organ.
Oh my gosh.
And several decades later, they got a package in the mail, and it was the 3 missing pipes. And apparently one of the schoolboys took them as a souvenir when they left, and he was really nervous to fess up. And so his widow, when he passed, his widow mailed him back.
Oh, wow.
I think that's cute.
I think that's great.
Yes.
One thing, and I don't know if you're going to mention this, but I was reading that so while the palace itself is spread across 7 acres, there's about 12,000 acres in total, right, for the estate?
Yes, thank you.
And it's one of the largest houses in England and is bigger than Buckingham Palace.
And
it's like 187 rooms?
Yes, and it is on the UNESCO World Heritage Site also, just like our home from 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
Yes, Hollyhock House.
Hollyhock, yeah.
Yes. But yes, you're exactly right. This house is massive. And it's really funny too, because so many people who did visit it were like, yes, it is technically a house, but it doesn't feel like a house because the halls are so wide and the ceilings are so tall, and it's just not, and what's interesting too is it has all of these statues and as tribute and as thanks to different events in English history, like the Duchess commissioned a statue of Queen Anne, and that's in the library. And then they had this huge...
That politically was a good thing to do.
Yes. Well, it was after she had passed.
Oh.
But yes.
Still,
yes.
politically a good thing to do.
Indeed. And made a lot of sense to do, given that she was the one that was really helping them fund the building of the house.
Yeah.
But then they had this like planter that was outside that was in this Romanesque design. And so it was originally part of a fountain, and then they used it as a planter. And then somebody who was visiting the house looked at it and was like, I feel like this is older than the 1700s. And it turns out it was a Roman antiquity sarcophagus.
Really?
Uh-huh. And so that's one of the items that's now on display there. There's this huge column of triumph, and it stands as kind of homage to the first Duke of Marlborough, John Churchill. He's like at the very top of the column with like a winged victory in his hand, and he's got these eagles at his feet, and he's in this battle armor. So it's very monumental in that way, in like a museum way, because it shows all of the success of England throughout this time. and the power of it.
That's great. I mean, what an honor.
Yes. And so today you can go and visit the palace and the grounds. It's like 40 pounds. So probably like around $50 per person to go. And you can go on a tour, and actually they're getting ready to start a roof restoration where they're completely redoing the roof. And they're looking for donors, by the way.
Wow.
Yes. And then also they're going to open up the kitchen so you can see what it was like to be a cook at that time. I'm down in the kitchens. And what's really funny is in 2019, somebody stole an 18-karat gold toilet from Blenheim, and it was like a whole deal. It was valued at 4.8 million pounds.
Oh, my goodness. What year was that?
In 2019. And in 2024, so just this past April, one of the responsible parties pled guilty. Yes.
Well, I guess they had to have something to do at the beginning of COVID.
I mean, but it was September 2019, so.
Oh, that's true.
You know
right
what it
before.
was? You'll do anything for a post or a view, right?
Well, that's true.
Social media.
Social media.
And then obviously Blenheim is frequently used for filming. James Bond movies have been shot there. Mission Impossible, period pieces,
Yeah.
It runs a gamut because it is such an interesting place, and it has so many areas for films. Actually, at one of the trees, I don't know if you recall, in one of the Harry Potter movies, it was a flashback to where Snape, as like a young kid, was being teased by a young James Potter. Anyway, that scene was shot there. So it has had its fair share of being in the spotlight for sure. And then in March 2024, it was announced that Blenheim Palace would be the venue for the 4th summit of the European Political Community, and that was taking place in July of 2024. So that is the story of Blenheim Palace.
So that's really, so today it's just used for various things.
It is, yes, and you can take tours.
That's really,
you can see all the staterooms.
Story.
Yes. So I think it's really interesting because a lot of the country homes you look at, and it was like the aristocrat owned the estate, and then he also owned kind of all of the buildings around that estate, and that's where the workers who worked his land would live. And so it was just kind of this like very cyclical situation. But this one isn't that case. This is, again, a gift to a war hero. And so I think that's what makes it unique and special.
I do too. I think that's wonderful.
And you know what else I was looking at a map because, I mean, obviously I know a little bit about Great Britain, but I didn't know geographically like where this was located. I knew it was located in Oxfordshire. So, but it's actually kind of like to the south of London. And it's, for me, I've always wondered how, okay, so obviously, Buckingham Palace and the palace itself was in the heart of London.
Right.
So how did these like aristocrats move and shake in like the social scene of the royal family if they were so far away?
Yeah.
And I guess that's probably something I should look at more. But it's just, I mean, and I guess in a way it's kind of like how congressmen and senators in the States have like an apartment in DC. But I don't know. How did it work back then, I wonder? I wonder too if maybe they just like
carriages.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because he didn't have a train.
Right.
So anyway.
Horseback carriages.
Yes. Oh, and sorry, I said it was to the south. I'm wrong. It's to like the northwest, not the southeast. Oxford is.
Okay.
So anyway, but yeah, it's
a great story.
Yes.
I mean, you could go on for a couple days talking about this. There's just so much to it. Well, not a couple days, but certainly a couple of podcasts just talking about the maze, the butterfly house, the gardens in general, the train ride, just on and on. But to me, one of the most unique things is learning about the bridge.
I know. Isn't that so funny?
That is so cool.
I don't know if I read about the butterfly garden.
Yeah, evidently, in just looking at some different facts, that was something I came across. So,
Oh, nice.
yeah.
And one other thing I forgot to mention is this had windows on windows. So first story windows, second story windows, third story windows. So it was very bright. I mean, obviously it was built in the 1700s, so they didn't have electricity or anything.
Right.
So they relied on windows. But it's very different than, again, the Hollyhock house we talked about 2 weeks ago, just given how many windows were in this place.
Yes, right.
So, and those 2 courtyards, I can't remember if I said this or not, but they really served no purpose aside from letting light into interior rooms. So they weren't like actual, let's chill out here. Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
Great. That's a great information.
thank you.
You.
Mm-hmm, of course. All right. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Thanks for listening to This Hot Mess.
And God bless.
Bye, y'all. Not your mama's house.